For those who follow this series, starting from this entry, I shall also be covering the single director's performances, because there is plenty of stuff to comment on in 1934. Last week we bumped into the new mascot, Buddy, who failed at leaving an impression, as he essentially proved to be the white and cutesy version of Bosco. Palmer's direction was horribly lackluster, so Schlesinger replaced him with Earl DUVALL, who was the actual responsible for Buddy's creation alongside Palmer. Possibly DUVALL's most interesting contribution in Schlesinger Studios is HONEYMOON Hotel, a Merry Melodies entry which happens to be the first Warner cartoon in Cinecolor, featuring a couple of bugs going on their honeymoon. Thus they lodge in a hotel to copulate, and they're being so passionate they cause a fire. Sure, the excessive singing here and there sounds a bit too corny and forced, but the setup is pretty decent, gags are funny, and everyone is such a voyeur, including the hotel personnel and the full moon. Animation-wise, a good streak of familiar names pops up uncredited, such as Bob Clampett, Chuck Jones and Frank Tashlin. Not sure about who did what though. Maybe Clampett animated the scenes with the moon and the toddler calendar, judging from the eye shape. It's only my assumption. Although what wasn't an assumption was his high opinion on his skills, as he left the Schlesinger Studios upon his salary increase had been denied. Freleng told in an interview that DUVALL was a nice guy, yet a heavy drinker, and one morning he was willing to convince Schlesinger to raise his salary at all cost. He was also intoxicated, and despite of Freleng trying to dissuade him, he still went ahead and got himself fired. That was the final time he saw him. His final short is the massively forgettable Buddy's Garage, a black and white Looney Tunes short. After his departure, Schlesinger absolutely had to find a new leader, which wasn't an easy task at first, as he attempted to replace him with composer Bernard Brown in a couple of trivial shorts, Petty in the Park and Those Were Wonderful Days, the latter of which has in its ending the only funny moment. Questionable pacing, yet an unexpected twist. As for DUVALL's animation unit, it was taken over by Freleng himself, whose 1934 was his first year as a solo director, upon assisting Hugh Orman's short a year prior. And it's indeed evident this is his first year as a supervisor, as his cartoons are lethargic and mundane, as if they were trying to mimic Disney but with a much lower budget. His loony entries are pretty bad, for essentially being buddy cartoons, and as for its Merry Melodies, Beauty and the Beast was their second two-strip Cinecolor experiment after HONEYMOON Hotel, which has more to do with the Nutcracker rather than actual Beauty and the Beast. The premise may sound passable, but in the end of the day, the Mary-esque musical numbers are just getting out of hand, and despite Freleng would make them far more functional in the future, they are getting more and more boring because they're easily interchangeable.
Beauty and the Beast. He's so mean and vicious.
He's singing your lines that necessary. However, after Beauty and the Beast, they would switch back to black and white, like in the case of the unbelievably racist Going to Heaven with a Mule or the tedious How Do I Know It's Sunday, but those beautiful dames would mark the definitive switch from black and white to two-strip Technicolor, perhaps the highlight of Freleng's regardless lackluster 1934. I'm not assuming it's particularly good or whatever, in fact, it's middle of the road content-wise. But there is definitely some unadulterated charm within, and again, the presence of pigmentation sort of raised the bar. At least in the Merry Melodies series, as Freleng would supervise said shorts, while the Looney Tunes didn't quite receive the same fortune, as Buddy is a downright boring mascot, so getting some comedy out of him is mere utopia. Not even the two new directors, Ben Hardaway and former Disney Jack King, improved the situation, as the Buddy cartoons would never reach the charmless horrors of Buddy's Day Out, but would still do little to nothing to qualify as mildly entertaining, because Buddy is a non-character. Why? For being a human? It's not about that. Popeye is a human character too, but showcases some traits that make him unique, such as his design, his godlike powers, his profession, being a sailor, and an iconic theme song. As much of a black stereotype Bosco could have been, at least he had a recognizable appearance, even without an effective personality, but at least qualifies as an effort, unlike Buddy, who has no physical and/or psychological feature that can turn him into a tangible character. But hey, Cookie's now Goldilocks, she's no longer black-haired. Does this change make her at least more interesting? It doesn't. She's still as aseptic as ever. Furthermore, listen to the opening theme of Buddy's Day Out. Does it remind you of something Looney Tunes related? Thought so. After a pretty tough year, Schlesinger still acknowledged that Disney was still 2 steps above, in spite of introducing 2-strip Technicolor in the Merry Melodies series. Yet on February 23rd, 1935, the band concert was released, probably their most impressive cartoon up to that moment, for several reasons, like Mickey conducting an orchestra filled with the main cast, Goofy, Horace, Clarabelle, Donald distracting the orchestra by playing his flute, the ridiculous number of animators behind it, and the use of 3-strip Technicolor. The higher the budget, the bigger its purchasing power. High budget equals to undisputed amount of talent. Only a gargantuan studio would handle a tornado sucking in a house piece by piece, and would add so many details during the climax with the orchestra playing in the middle of a storm. This is such a crucial cartoon. Mickey will never be this great character-wise. Seeing him so pissed off makes him far more down-to-earth compared to his upcoming depictions. Then what ought Schlesinger to do in this situation? Upon Buddy's failure, his studio knew he should ride the wave of talking animals. So, on March 2nd, 1935,